October 14, 1944. Late afternoon. Somewhere above the frozen forests of eastern Hungary, near the collapsing front lines of the Eastern Front, the sky looks empty. But then, shapes appear. 1, 2, 4, 8, 12. Soviet fighters slicing through the pale autumn clouds, their radial engines growling as they tighten a circle around a single point. And in the center of that tightening ring, one lone German fighter. Inside the narrow cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf 109, a 22-year-old Oberleutnant grips the control stick with calm, gloved hands. 12 enemy aircraft. He does not panic. He studies them. Kustodisman. Numbers mean less than positioning. The Soviet pilots believe they have him trapped. They close the circle tighter. 12 fighters turning like wolves around a single wounded deer. But this pilot knows something they don't. None of them has actually caught him yet. Not once, and in the thin air above the Eastern Front, that difference means everything. I'm Rana Asif, and this is a deep dive into the mind of a predator. Long before this moment, long before the legend, this pilot was just a boy growing up in Germany between the wars. His name was Erich Hartmann. He was born in 1922 in a Germany still bruised by defeat in the First World War, but his mother, Elizabeth Hartmann, was one of the first female glider pilots in the country. From the time he could walk, Erich watched aircraft rise silently into the sky. Flying became inevitable. As a teenager, he joined the German gliding clubs. In those quiet, engineless gliders, Hartmann learned something many fighter pilots never mastered: patience. He learned to read the sky, to feel invisible currents of air. Those habits would shape the most lethal fighter pilot the world had ever seen. By the time Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Hartmann was still in training, talented, but not yet exceptional. His instructors noted something unusual, though. He wasn't aggressive in the traditional sense. He preferred stalking, closing unseen, striking only when success was certain. Many young pilots rushed headlong into dogfights. Hartmann did not. He hunted. By 1943, the war over the Eastern Front had become one of the largest aerial battlefields in history. The Soviet Air Force, rebuilding after early losses. Among the German units was Jageschwader 52, the most successful fighter wing in aviation history, and its deadliest pilot was now Hartmann. By late 1944, he had already destroyed over 300 enemy aircraft, an almost impossible number. But numbers alone didn't explain why Soviet pilots feared him. It was how he fought. He would approach unseen, diving out of the sun until the enemy aircraft filled his entire windscreen. He fired from point-blank range, one burst, and then he was gone. Soviet pilots began calling him something whispered across the radio: the Black Devil. But on this afternoon above Hungary, the situation is different. Hartmann has already completed several patrols. Fuel is low. Cloud layers limit his escape routes, and now those 12 Soviet fighters have him. They're coordinating. One peels down to cut off a dive, another climbs above. They're smart. A Soviet pilot fires first. Tracer rounds streak past Hartmann's canopy. The trap is closing, but Hartmann isn't looking at the fighters. He's looking at the spaces between them, because in every formation, there is always a weakness, a seam, and if he finds it, the hunters will suddenly become the hunted. Hartmann pushes the throttle forward. The engine roars. The Messerschmitt's nose dips slightly, but the first move he makes will look completely insane. The first Soviet pilot expects him to dive. That's what trapped pilots do. Instead, Hartmann climbs. The sudden maneuver is so unexpected that for half a second, the Soviet formation hesitate. The lone Messerschmitt pitches upward, climbing straight toward the tightening circle. Hartmann isn't thinking about 12 fighters. He's thinking about energy, momentum. Every aircraft is a bundle of stored energy. Speed becomes altitude. Altitude becomes speed. The Soviet fighters that follow him burn that energy to climb. Their circle widens. It loosens, just a little. At the top of the climb, the world goes quiet. Then Hartmann kicks the rudder. The fighter snaps into a brutal rolling turn and drops like a stone, straight down through the center of the Soviet formation. The sky explodes into motion. One Soviet pilot flashes across his gun sight. Too fast, he holds fire. Patience. Another yak appears, climbing sharply. This one is perfect. A short, 2-second burst. Shells slam into the engine cowling. Smoke erupts. The Soviet fighter spirals down. Hartmann doesn't watch it fall, he's already gone. But the Soviets recover quickly. They're learning. 8 fighters roll into pursuit. 4 climb high, trying to cut him off. They're angry, and they're forming a wider, smarter net. This time, there's no obvious gap. The trap is reforming. Hartmann glances at his fuel gauge. It's low. For the first time that afternoon, he realizes this might actually be a trap he can't just outrun. The Messerschmitt plunges through a ragged layer of cloud. Gray vapor swallows the world. Behind him, the Soviet fighters enter the cloud bank seconds later. Suddenly, no one can see anyone. Hartmann smiles. This is where patience matters. He eases back on the throttle, letting the pursuers surge ahead of him, flying blind, trusting his instruments, a skill he learned in those silent gliders years ago. Faint shadows appear. A yak fighter slices through the mist just ahead, completely unaware. Hartmann closes the distance silently and squeezes the trigger. The yak explodes. 2 kills. The Soviet formation disintegrates into confusion. Hartmann uses the chaos to dive out of the clouds. He emerges to find 3 more Soviet fighters below. He approaches from behind, slightly above, invisible against the glare of the sun. He waits. Closer, closer. Now, guns fire. The first burst slams into a Yakni. 3 kills. He pulls up sharply before the others can react. 9 enemy fighters remain, but the hunt has changed. They are no longer hunting him. They are flying defensively, waiting for the next attack. Fuel is nearly gone. Time is running out. Hartmann makes one final, high-speed diving pass through their formation. Not to attack, but to scatter them one last time. As the Soviet pilots scramble to avoid a collision, Hartmann levels out and races for the front lines. Minutes later, with his fuel gauge touching empty, his own airfield appears. He lands hard, but he's back. By the end of the war, Erich Hartmann would become the highest-scoring fighter pilot in history, with 352 confirmed victories. Yet many of his battles looked exactly like this one. Not heroic dogfights, but quiet moments of patience, precision, and the terrifying realization, often too late for his enemies, that the pilot they thought they had trapped was never really trapped at all. Thanks for watching the deep dive. If you want to see more stories about history's most fascinating figures, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Rana Asif, and I'll see you in the next one.